Hi, everybody. So this video is to discuss the next essay assignment, but first of all, which is essay 2, the academic synthesis. But first of all, I wanted to give you a round of applause. Yay! You guys were on fire these last couple of days on the discussion board, and I really appreciate the in-depth discussions, and I really want to thank the moderators for pushing you guys to think a little bit more deeply about what was kind of the themes and things that were popping up in the readings. And I made a list actually of what I saw as common things that could be used in this next essay, and I'll get to that in a little bit. So first of all, I wanted to talk a little bit about this kind of essay. For many of you, this will seem really familiar, that the academic synthesis is something that you've probably done in your other courses. Sometimes it's called a literature review. And so what that means is that we're bringing sources together and we're going to basically report them to the reader to show perhaps either a history, sometimes that's how an academic synthesis is used, to show a history of an issue, and then to show that you've done your homework and now I'm going forward with my idea or my proposal, okay? And sometimes an academic synthesis also sets the stage for a research study, so that again, you've done your research, you have looked at the issues that have currently been written about, okay? So for us, we're gonna practice with that type of writing. And so rhetorically, though, I did want to take a moment to talk about how this works with this concept of relationality that we've been kind of focusing on, but perhaps not in too much depth, okay? So as we step into academic writing and academic thinking, we look at relationality as a way of showing, again, how things are related, and this academic synthesis is kind of the perfect opportunity to do that. So with the academic synthesis, what we want to do, though, unfortunately, and this is academia, is we extract ourselves from the conversation, okay? So what you want to show in this essay is how your 4 sources are talking to each other. And as you know, with a conversation, sometimes all 4 people interject or have an idea and they're talking about the same thing. And then in other places, perhaps only 2 people are having a conversation, or 3. And this is what you want to think of as you're putting your essay together. So that's why it's important to not just summarize source by source. So your organizational scheme in this essay is really going to be topic by topic, or sometimes we call it theme by theme. And then you'll pick what each person or each of your sources has to say about that topic, idea, or theme. And that's the difficult part. So let's take a look at the assignment. Let me do a screen share. And let me see if yep, that should be where it is. So, yep, yay, okay. All right, so when we talk about an academic synthesis for this particular assignment, I do want you to choose 2 of the pieces that we have read for this week. So that would be, you can choose either Young, and I hope I'm saying this right, Milanese, or Estrada. So any one of those, pick 2 of those. And there's lots of commonalities as you've read through and participated in the discussion board. You can see perhaps where where there's a lot of idea overlap, okay? And then you're going to add 2 sources of your choice from either the UHD libraries, databases, okay? And there are many of them. As juniors and seniors, you've probably already have had experience in exploring those within your field, okay? Or those in general, okay? So the ones in general would be something like Academic Search Complete. And that's a kind of a general database on issues. And then there's some that are specific, like PsycLit, or for psychology, or ERIC for education. I'm not familiar with the social work ones yet, but you can go into the library's listing of databases, and sometimes they are categorized by discipline. But you're not stuck with that, okay? You can pick whatever sources you feel are going to help you kind of expand your ideas that you're working with in this essay. So when we work with an academic synthesis, okay, we want to not only show how the authors are relating to each other. But when we're all done with that, in the conclusion, we want to kind of talk about what we got out of this. What did we learn if we've pulled back and we've looked at what the, if we summarize and kind of think about what the authors have said about the topic or the theme. All right, so let's get into the nitty gritty of the assignment, and then we'll pull back again and try to talk about this in a little bit more detail. And I know my videos are getting a little long, so I'm going to try to kind of speed it up a little bit. Okay. All right. So two essays from what we have read today, two sources from the UHD library database. However, you're not limited to print sources. I do want to give you some freedom of being able to look at the many, many things that have just come out recently, probably in the last couple of months. Since the unfortunate murder of George Floyd, there is a lot of stuff that's available and that are reliable, and they would fit really well with this class. So you can, perhaps one of your sources is a documentary that talks about language or talks about children and race, and I mean, there's lots of really good stuff out there. There's also really good podcasts. There are other print sources too, not just what's found in the libraries. So Teaching Tolerance is another really good resource. And you may know of other websites in your field that aren't necessarily curated in the UHD libraries databases. So I would invite you to look for resources that you want to use. And if they're not from the UHD library, just email me for approval. I'm sure that you will have vetted it to make sure that it follows all the things that a good, solid resource does, that it's reliable, it's current, it's also relates to your topic, okay, and that it's not fake. And that would be another thing for you to be able to suss out if this is what you're going to be doing outside of the UHD library. Now, everything in the UHD library, as you know, has been curated, and so anything that's coming from there is good, and you don't have to worry about whether it's real or not. Okay, so let's get to the hard part of this essay, because this is the hard part. Okay, when you organize your synthesis, you are going to be choosing topics, themes, or underlying ideas that your essays and your research have in common. So they don't all have to agree. And in fact, if you get some disagreements, that makes for a little bit more exciting research, right? Because then you've got this interesting balance of, who says this? Oh, wow, this person disagrees with that. And here's why. And so now we've got this nice mesh of ideas. I really want to stress this so much so that I'm actually going to highlight it in yellow. You're going to utilize summaries rather than quotations. For this type of paper, summaries are going to carry you a long way because you're summarizing maybe pages of information, whereas just a single quote only demonstrates just one aspect. And I know that quotes can be very powerful. Okay, but in this type of paper, the thing is to share information. And how do you share a lot of information and take a lot of maybe several pages and maybe condense it down to a paragraph? And that's through the skill of summary. Okay? So summary is going to carry you a long way. Otherwise, what you'll end up doing is to saying, quote this, and then this person, oh, quote that, and then you don't give us a context, okay? So summaries become super important in this essay, and I would prefer that you really try to stay away from quotes as much as possible, okay? The other part that's tricky is that you are going to be, I'm gonna go groovy with the colors here. All right, so you're going to show the relationships between the content of the essay. And in doing that, okay, you really have to use what we call signal phrases and other kinds of verbs that either show the relationship, like author X agrees with, okay, however, they don't fully agree, okay, but we want to mix up our verbs a little bit, okay, and one of the sources that I have for you in the helpful links to all things writing folder is a list of verbs that show agreement, disagreement, whether they compare, contrast, and so there's a nice list of lovely words there for you to use. But that really becomes an important part about how we show relationality. We want to demonstrate that, okay? So don't make your audience guess, but then don't also just stick to like a one trick. Agree, disagree, contend, you know. So what we want is a wide variety of verbs, okay? So you want to think of this as similarities and differences, okay? So this is maybe at its very core, a compare and contrast paper, but of course it's a little bit more complicated than that. What I don't want you to do, okay, and this is what I get a lot of the time, so we'll just, maybe do this in a caution color here, red, okay? Don't simply string together the summaries, okay, for each of the essays. You do have to show some kind of relationship between your sources, okay? This website that I have marked here, which you can look at, I don't want to take too much video time here, really kind of gives you a way to structure it. There's in the other helpful links folder, there's also like there's a an outline for how to write a synthesis and other things that will really help you. Okay, so we've got 5 pages, but of course you can do more, just not less. Okay, so in order to fill those 5 pages, let's just kind of get back to this idea about using a summary. So that summaries do fill pages if this is kind of what you're thinking of. How do I fill those 5 pages? You're going to use summary, and that's going to really help you. Okay, so 5 full pages. If you're going to use APA, we got a lot of questions about that this last time. So this time, yes, we want a title page. I want an abstract, and then use the running head and the whole bit so that you get used to using APA. You're not required, of course. MLA works just fine, or Chicago, Tribune, you know, CME, whatever citation style that you want to use, you can, just as long as it's consistent. Okay, and okay, so we'll press on here. All right, let me see. Other than there's a grading criteria that you can read. Okay, so let me just stop the share here because you can read this. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about some of the things that I found as I read through the discussions, and you might see other things too. So in skimming through the discussions, some of the topics, okay, categories, ideas, things that I found as I was reading through this that had at least one thing in common with one other essay, okay, would be this idea about double consciousness. And many of you raised that from the Young essay. And I think that that would work really wonderfully with sources that you find about double consciousness, okay? We also talked about, some of you picked up on the psychological implications of double consciousness on, of people of color, but specifically on African Americans. So that would be one topic, okay, in your paper that you might want to pick up on. Now, in that one big broad topic of double consciousness, if you wanted to look at, and you find sources that talk about different aspects of it, effects on children, effects on adults, effects on society, and you find other sources that kind of support that, that would be a nice way of bringing in double consciousness. So how do we bring in the other 2 essays with this topic? That would be kind of up to you to figure that out. Okay, Milanese and Estrada may not have a key role in that, but I think that you can figure out a way to bring this in if we use that, if you use double consciousness as just one great big topic. Now, you don't have to just stick with one. So perhaps we have double consciousness, we have code meshing, and we have code switching. Okay, so now we like things in 3s, okay? All essays, you know, usually have the 3 reasons, but we do as human beings, for some reason, really gravitate towards things of 3. So you could have 3 topics that your sources kind of touch on or talk about. So you could, you know, talk about double consciousness, you could talk about public perceptions of race, and then you could talk about code meshing and code switching specifically, okay? So that would work. So here's my list of other things that I just kind of jotted down as I was reading your stuff. Okay, which was interesting to say the least. Yay. All right, so we have public perceptions of race. Other things I saw were psychological implications of double consciousness. children and race, and that came up. Most of you are going to be working with kids, and so children's perceptions of race. There's some interesting things that go on that might be out there, especially recently. Again, code switching and misinterpretation, and I'm thinking of the Milanese piece specifically on that. Okay, that how language gets misinterpreted, especially if somebody is code switching. With the dominant race. We have racial representations. So you focused on dolls, okay, and how self-identity and representation of toys is one thing, but also then if you wanted to bring that out a little bit further, just recently, we're talking about the removal of racist images from commercial products, right? Or one particular football team. So that's another way that you can bring in these other two essays into a conversation with sources that you're looking at, okay? We talked about code switching in education, code meshing perhaps in education, in psychology, and in social work. You want to perhaps look at how this is perceived, if at all. This might be just strictly in education, but it could be further. Okay, so another thing I saw was race and quality of education. And there's lots of stuff out there about how, perhaps where you live, how race is treated in the quality of education. And then the last thing, which is kind of my reason for choosing this book, which is called The Language and Power Reader, would be assimilation and dominant language, right? Assimilation into the dominant language. How does code meshing and code switching kind of circumvent that, okay? And allow for the respect of all languages and dialects and other ways that we use English, okay? So there would be, other ways of bringing that in. So these are some of my ideas. You probably have a bazillion of your own, but just to let you know that these are how you have these categories and then maybe find some research. Okay, so final words, or close to final words. Okay, after you find your research, okay, and you read it through, you're gonna have to read it through a couple of times. Okay, you're gonna find your categories, okay, things where the authors have something to say that are in common, and then sometimes where they kind of go off and they are in the ballpark, but they're saying something different. You as the writer have to guide the reader into those kinds of suppositions, okay? And those assumptions or those connections that you specifically are making that really helps the reader, okay? And then finally, we want to make sure that that what you're reading is, I guess, relatable. Okay, and what I mean by relatable is that it relates to the topic and that you don't interject your opinion. Okay? Because as soon as you interject your opinion, you've kind of lost the whole reason for writing an academic synthesis. So it has to be academic, which means neutral, fair, balanced, and using language that is also neutral in tone. So as soon as you start to say, I think, I disagree, we would be better off if we did this, then you're entering into what we're going to be using for the next paper. So you will get a chance to express your own opinion, but not in this paper, okay? So sometimes what I tell my other students when we're writing either a lit review or this paper, it's not to be callous, but I don't care what you think at this point in this paper, okay? What I do care about is what your sources are saying. So if you can kind of write that on a Post-it, put it on your computer screen. Dr. Cheryl in this paper does not really care what you think. She cares about what the sources have to say. Okay, so if you have any questions, I'm holding open office hours on Sunday from 7:30 to 9. If you'd like to meet another time, send me an email and we can arrange for a Zoom conversation. whenever, if it fits with our schedules. But I'm going to do open office hours, and what that means is that you can drop in, ask a couple of questions. Maybe somebody else will come in with the same questions, and we can have a little conversation. And then when you're done, you're out. But I'll be there from 7:30 to 9 p.m. on Sunday. And I really hope to see you there. All right, take care, happy writing, and have a lovely weekend.